How to repair Amtec K-Nuts. Fix the nut in a vise to prevent the thrust ring from extruding when you're doing this test. Amtec uses specialty clamps for this job. Let us know you like the plans for that. Begin by removing one of the filler screw assemblies using the Allen wrench that comes with your nut. Then actuate one of the piston assemblies, which will push the chrome ball out of the hole. Be sure not to lose it. Find the filler nipple that came with your hydraulic nut. If you can't find it, reach out to your local Amtec distributor for another replacement. Install the filler nipple by hand and tighten with a wrench or a socket. We use this little T-handle jobby. Now remove the nut from the vise and place flat down on a bench. Attach your Amtec hand pump to the filler nipple and begin to pump until you see the thrust ring starting to protrude from the bottom of the nut. After it's mostly extended, you can flip it over give it a couple of taps with a soft blow hammer to even it out, and then simply pull it away. Set the thrust ring aside, turn the nut on the side, and perhaps get a helping hand if you need it. Using your Amtec hand pump, begin to pump until you see the seal begin to protrude from the nut body. Lay the nut back down again. Now use a putty knife or similar flat device, stick it under the gap in the seal, push down on the putty knife to push the seal upwards, and then run the putty knife around the circumference, pulling the entire seal away from the body. Set the seal aside and clean out all of the grease that's left over in the groove of the nut body. You can use putty knives, rags, or anything that you have laying around so long as you do not scratch the bore of the nut body. If required, get your brand new Amtec dual durometer seal. Pinch the seal across one circumference. This helps invert the U-cup shape so that it's easier to install. Place the U-cup end into the groove and push down. It may help to manipulate the seal as you see our technician doing here, constantly pulling back and pushing back down again. Now obtain your dead blow hammer and make yourself a nice little wooden tool from hardwood, just like you see here. Make sure it has a rounded tip. While pushing sideways with the wooden tool, gently hammer the top of the seal into the groove. Now take your replacement thrust ring. Be sure that the sharp edge goes towards the seal and the chamfered head will go out towards your tooling. Once again, using your dead blow hammer, gently tap it in around the entire circumference. Remember, that O-ring on the outside is just for friction. It is not a sealing element. Once the thrust ring is flush, you can place it back in your bench vise again. If equipped, use a chisel and hammer to punch the roll pin out of the body. This part can be tricky. Once partially removed, you can use vice grips or pliers to help pull it the rest of the way from the body. Here, our technician uses some gentle taps just to coerce it out of the body. If your nut is installed with a limit screw, simply remove it using the Allen wrench that came with your hydraulic nut. Again, using the Allen wrench that came with your hydraulic nut, remove the actuator entirely. Please note, this T-handle version is the one we have in our shop, but you can find these at any hardware store. Once again, connect your Amtec Hydraclamp hand pump and begin pumping until you push the actuator out of the pocket. The backup ring and seal may also come out with the piston. In this case, only the backup ring came out. We now need to remove the piston seal, so let's clean this grease out so that we can find it. You can make similar tools out of old dental picks or even paper clips. Reach down the center of the bore to hook onto the seal and gently remove it. Now clamp the other side of the seal and thrust ring so that it remains inside the bore. We're going to start pressurizing it a little bit. Once again, using your Amtec hand pump, begin to pump until grease starts to come from the piston cavity. Our goal here is to pump until you see all of the bubbles gone from the stream. We want to see a nice smooth stream with no trapped bubbles that could cause issues. If any of these bubbles remained inside your hydraulic nut during operation, they lead to spongy performance and perhaps reduced full pressure. Once the stream is free from bubbles, we're going to clean out the piston cavity to allow us to reinstall an actuator set. Using some fresh grease, pack the piston seal. It helps with lubrication as well. Place the seal sideways into the bore, and using a smaller blunted wooden tool, we use a chopstick, gently push the seal to the bottom of the cavity, making sure when it rests at the bottom it's entirely flat and horizontal. Now drop the backup washer into the cavity and push it down to the bottom. This one's made from Teflon, so you don't have to be quite so gentle. Now place the piston inside the bore with a larger size facing up. Push the piston down as far as you can, but now we have to bleed the nut some more to remove any trapped grease and air. So now remove the filler screw. Now push down hard on the piston so that it drops to the bottom of the piston cavity. Be prepared for the grease that will shoot out of the filler nipple hole. You can see the piston is now all the way to the bottom. Now you can take your new actuator screw, insert it into the body, and begin to tighten it down. Continue to tighten until the actuator screw bottoms out onto the piston. You can leave this screw in this position for now. If you have more piston assemblies, replace them all now before proceeding to the next step. If you have indicator pin assemblies, make one of these tools out of an old socket. The U shape will allow you to remove the indicator pin retainer. Back out the retainer until it's fully out of the pocket. Using a pair of needle nose pliers, gently remove the indicator pin assembly. If you plan to reuse your indicator pin springs, keep them in the same order and be very careful, only replace the seal. Otherwise, take your brand new indicator pin assembly, lubricate the seal, and place it into the bore of the indicator pin pocket. Now using a peen and a hammer, place something protective so you don't ruin the red paint. Gently tap it into the hole. Apply a small amount of Teflon paste onto the threads. Now install the retainer screw and using your special socket, tighten until it's flat with the housing. You can now back out one or all of the actuators. Just like with the indicator pin, make sure they're all the way up and flush. Once again, using your Amtec hand pump, begin to fill the nut with grease. Our goal is to fill all of these cavities with grease and remove as much air as possible. As you pump grease, you're going to fill all these pressure cavities with grease as you push the seal and piston back against the actuator screws. Depending on the size and design, you may have 1, 2, or 3 actuator assemblies. In this case, they're all under these arrows. You will also have 2 or 3 filler nipple locations. These are important to know because they're going to help us bleed the nut of air. The idea is to fill the entire pressure cavity with grease, pushing out as much air as possible. Remove the ball and screw from one of the filler nipple assemblies, and then using the filler nipple on the opposite side, begin to pump grease into the nut until grease comes out of the hole in a clean, air-free nature. Every K-nut has at least 2 holes for bleeding. However, some of the larger designs have at least 3. Try to use a combination of directions as you push grease into the nut and air out. You may have to change the nipple and ball and screw assembly many times to ensure this. Remember, we have many sizes of nuts, just like the smaller one. You may need to alternate the sides in which you pump grease into, or, conversely, you may need to actuate the pistons as an alternative method to push air out of the pocket. Some of our very tiny nuts will absolutely require you to activate the piston assemblies as an alternative method to push grease through the nut and help remove air. Anytime you actuate a piston all the way to the bottom, use grease pressure from the hand pump to refill the nut with fresh grease. You'll know that you did a good job of bleeding air that when you have your hydraulic nut installed in your application, the actuators create resistance within the first couple of turns. Regardless, reinstall all your chrome balls and set screw assemblies. Do not try to do a high-pressure hydraulic test with these nuts. The thrust ring and seal will simply pop out again. If you're unable to create full pressure in your system, try bleeding it all of air once again.